Show us around. Okay. So now we store our salivate samples. Real quick, when we say salivate samples, we're just talking about collecting spit, saliva, usually in a tube so scientists can study things like hormones, DNA, or even stress levels. And we'll get into how that's used later in the episode.
Do you want to tell us what professor you're working under?
Yeah, so I'm working under Dr. Bennett.
Divya currently works in the Stress Waves Biobehavioral Research Lab under Dr. Jeanette Bennett. The lab studies metabolites, which are small molecules our bodies make during metabolism, to understand how we respond to stress. They specifically focus on the sympathetic nervous system, which kicks in during fight or flight, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which helps the body relax and recover.
Oh yeah, so we have a lot of the salivate samples. Okay.
So I'm gonna assume that your samples don't have anything to do with your research you're doing currently right now.
Not my personal research.
Can you kind of guide us through what that's like?
Yeah, sure. So I am doing an honors thesis in psychology, hopefully an honors thesis in psychology. That is looking at the effects of childhood trauma on cognitive function. And we're looking at a few mediators like communication and positive outlook and things like that on that. So it basically combines the biological aspect of communication and physiological effects of that, along with the childhood trauma aspect, cognitive function aspect, and other stuff. That's psychology. So it's very interdisciplinary between biology and psychology.
Cool. So now that you've kind of told me about that, when you hit a wall in research, what is your, I don't want to say coping mechanism, but what is the first thing you do to kind of like step away, let me rethink this?
Take a break.
Take a break.
Sometimes you just have to take a break because you've been reading information and journal articles for so long that it just kind of blends together in your brain and does not make any sense. So that's one way you can do it. But another way, maybe, so if you were just reading a journal article, sometimes I like to use AI to summarize journal articles in like layman's terms for me, because they can be very technical, right? And maybe I just don't have the brain power to analyze what all of these technical terms mean right now,
Right.
Especially after a long day of classes or something. So sometimes I'll use AI and be like, hey, so what does this actually mean? Explain it to me like I'm 4 years old, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
So changing your approach, that's basically right. If none of those work, then I'll go to my mentor. And ask, hey, so I can't figure this out. Can you help me?
Okay.
And if she's busy, and maybe I'd go to a fellow RA, a friend maybe who's also doing psychology research. Maybe they'd be able to interpret it for me.
Cool. So I think you were going to show us another room.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello.
Hey, Divya. So can you tell the audience where we're at right now?
Right. So this is one of our lab's visit rooms. Usually participants will come here. Come on in. Usually participants will come here whenever they're scheduled for a visit, and I will run the visit. Participant chair. I always say that looks like a dentist chair.
I was going to say,
does.
this models a doctor's office.
It really does. Yeah. Definitely. So generally we'll do blood pressure, which is right there. We'll do a saliva sample depending on the study. So we would have a salivate tube that's prepped, and I can show you one really quick. So we've been using these salivate tubes recently, and so a participant would just use a funnel and literally spit in there,
Okay.
which is crazy.
Interesting.
Some people are uncomfortable, which I understand. I really do. But we do model it for them, so at least they're like, okay, somebody's doing it with me.
Right, comfortable.
Right.
Okay.
That's one of the main things that happens in this room. So we greet the participant as they come in. We usually check their temperature because, especially if we're collecting a biophysiological sample, so we don't want to have any of their sample if it's contaminated because they're sick, because that can be dangerous for the person that's going to be analyzing it later.
Right.
Especially because it's going to sit in the freezer for a little bit before we can get to analyzing it, assaying and all that. Yeah, so we do blood pressure. And then for one of our studies, I'm not sure if I mentioned it yet, but it's called the mind grip.
Okay.
And so we measure, that one measures the effect of isometric hand grip exercise versus meditation on cardiovascular health, which is measured via blood pressure. So we used a hand anemometer, which I can show you. It's one of my least favorite devices in the world. But, so basically, when you turn this on, so when you turn that on, it goes to like whatever unit you need to be, and we usually do kilograms. And so you squeeze really hard, and it gives you your max voluntary contraction rate, max voluntary contraction, and then 30% of that is your average. So you would have your fingers at a 90-degree angle.
Okay.
And then you squeeze as hard as you can. And so that's your max voluntary contraction. Then 30% of this is what you would do for your hand grip exercise. So I believe it's 4 reps of 2 minutes each that you have to hold that 30% value for your hand grip exercise. And you do that, I believe, 3 times a week for up to 9 weeks. And we measure the effects of that on cardiovascular health versus a meditation exercise.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. This is probably also the participant's least favorite part of the visit, because your hand gets really sore at the end.
All right. So while we're here, before we head on to the other room that you're going to show us, can you give the students and listeners advice as to how they can get into research?
Yeah. So 1, be as proactive as possible. If you have a professor that you're taking a class with and you know that they have a research lab, even if you're not very extremely interested in what they're studying, but you're interested in the topic or the subject that they're studying overall, reaching out to them never hurts, right? Because maybe once you get into the research, you realize that, oh, I actually really like this. Or you're like, you go in, you reinforce your belief that you don't like it, and you can move on to something else. At least you know what you are wanting to go towards. So it narrows down your search after that, right? And then other than that, change your approach if one approach is not working. So say you've been cold emailing professors, professors that have a research lab at UNC Charlotte. One way you can change your approach is maybe just show up to their office hours. Or before you get to that extreme, maybe see if they have any requirements for you to join their lab. So for example, psychology requires that you take research methodology 2, which is a course for all psych majors before you do psych research, because that teaches you how to do psych research. Similarly with bio, the course prereq for bio research is cell bio, and that's just because cell bio teaches you a lot of the basics of the cellular systems and the organelles and all that. So unless you have those foundational aspects and concepts down, some professors will be like, even if you come in, you won't be able to do anything.
Right.
So there's no point in you coming in, right? So that could be one of the reasons why they won't even reply to you, because they see that you're a freshman. Maybe you haven't taken any course or haven't proved that you have those abilities in some way.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So, Vivian, can you please let us know where we're at right now and like what's done in this room?
Yeah, so this is where all of the visit post-processing takes place. So any data we collect that's not a biomarker, like not a not a salivate or like blood or something like that that's hazardous, we process that here. So a lot of the times in our visits we'll collect heart rate variability data, which we do with like a regular exercise band that runners would use, because that gets direct skin to skin contact. It's right at your sternum, and so it collects very accurate heart rate data, and so that is processed right here. The watch is plugged in here, and so an application pulls up, and we import the data and then process it via an application called Cubios, and Excel sheets and all of that. So,
all that very fun stuff to do, I'm sure.
very much.
Okay.
But like, however boring it might be, this is probably where we spend the most time in lab, because the wet lab is mainly for assaying data, and then the visit rooms and such, we have the one that I showed you, and then we have, I believe, 1 or 2 more, and so those are mainly for the visits, right? We can't really, as you might have noticed, there weren't really any computers there.
Right.
There might have been laptops for the participants for surveys and such, but we can't really process data there. It's to collect it over there, but
Right.
most of the time when you're in lab, you're in here.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for showing us around today. Before we wrap up, I want to ask you, what's next? I mean, you have so much going on, you have so much on your plate. When you graduate, like, what's the next thing?
It's a question of the hour, isn't it? So currently I'm pre-med, as I might have mentioned. I don't really remember. But so ideally I would like to go to med school, pursue that career option.
Okay.
In the case that on that journey I'm, I guess, warded away from med school, I would probably go into research, because it's been such a big part of my journey and I enjoy it. I think I would enjoy it a lot more if that was all I was doing, as opposed to doing classes and research, because
Right.
that can get overwhelming, as we've talked about earlier.
Yeah.
But mainly that. So those 2 options, those are 2 career paths.
Okay.
After that, we'll see when we get there.
Okay.
That's a long time away.
Cool.
But I'm looking forward to it, because as I might have mentioned earlier, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Right. Cool. So where can the audience find your lab's work, or your work specifically?
So the lab does have a website. I believe it's called, if you search up UNCC SWBRL, which is Stress Waves Biobehavioral Lab, and you'll find all of our RAs there. You'll find our PI, which is Dr. Bennett.
Okay, so I forgot to mention this earlier. PI stands for Principal Investigator. They're basically the head researcher who runs a lab or project, kind of like the director of a movie, but for science. They guide the research, manage funding, and mentor students and staff. As Divya will mention, Dr. Bennett is the PI of our lab, and you'll notice a lot of undergraduate researchers in future episodes work under professors who are also PIs in their labs.
And you'll find our projects also listed, so that's how you can follow the lab. For me, I'll probably end up finishing my thesis project around end of next semester. So hopefully I'll present at either the Honors Research Symposium or the Undergraduate Research Symposium in the spring of next year. So those are ways that you can follow with my research.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to show us what you've been working on.
Yep.
And we're wishing you all the best. Thank you all for joining the ETHEL podcast today, and we will leave the link for all of Divya's work and her lab's website somewhere below.